The Mary Celeste is probably history's most infamous and terrifying ghost ship. Its vanishing crew left the world investigating for decades, and the most likely answer is the most disturbing of all. The Mary Celeste was a Canadian-built 282-ton ship. Constructed of locally felled timber, she was Carvel-built with the hull planted flush rather than overlapping. Originally, she was named Amazon, and she had quite the adventures and misadventures, from her maiden voyage to her final voyage, and even afterward. In June of 1861, the Amazon took her maiden voyage to Five Islands, Nova Scotia, to take on a cargo of timber for passage across the Atlantic to London. During the loading, the ship's captain became ill. The Amazon returned to Spencer Island, where Captain McClellan passed away from his illness. While his illness was unexpected, it was common for unwell people to pass from their ailments during that time, as medical advancements had not yet been made. A new captain took over the ship, but the tragedy wasn't over yet. Captain John Nutting Parker took over and resumed the voyage to London. During its journey, the Amazon encountered further misadventures. Not only did she collide with fishing equipment off Eastport, Maine, but after leaving London, she also ran into and sank a brig in the English Channel. And that was just her maiden voyage. The Amazon worked the next 2 years mainly in the West Indies trade, with Parker still in command. In 1863, Parker was succeeded by William Thompson, who remained in command until 1867. During that time, things were fairly quiet for the Amazon, but in October 1867, a storm hit. The storm drove Amazon ashore on Cape Breton Island. She was so badly damaged that her owners abandoned her as a wreck. But this isn't the mysterious wreckage just yet. This is still only the beginning. Not long after, she was acquired as a shipwreck by a man from Nova Scotia. What was left of the Amazon was quickly sold to a local businessman, who then sold it to an American mariner from New York, Richard W. Haynes, in 1868. He paid $1,750 for the wreckage and then spent another $8,825 restoring it. He made himself the captain and gave her a new name, Mary Celeste. Sadly, Haynes put a lot of work into the ship, but it never got wet. Haynes apparently had some trouble paying off his debt, and the following year, the ship was seized by its creditors. It was sold to a consortium headed by James H. Winchester and went under the radar for several years, until a major project began. In 1872, the ship got another makeover, costing a whopping $10,000. Her length was increased to 103 feet or 31 meters. Her breadth to 25.7 feet or 7.8 meters, and her depth to 16.2 feet or 4.9 meters. She also got a second deck and another new captain. Benjamin Spooner Briggs, an American family man with a family history at sea, took command of Mary Celeste. He prepared for her first voyage after the extensive refit to Genoa, Italy. Excited for the journey, he decided to bring his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, leaving their school-aged son at home with his grandmother. Briggs chose his crew carefully, with each bringing various skills and experience, and all of them highly recommended by the ship's owner, Winchester. Some also had affiliations with Briggs himself. Briggs was confident in his crew and the voyage ahead. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor en route to Genoa, Italy, carrying a large cargo of alcohol. It was 2 days behind schedule, but Briggs had decided to wait out some nasty weather to err on the side of caution. 8 days after Mary Celeste departed, another Canadian ship, De Gratia, also left on the same route to Genoa. Briggs and the De Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, had known each other and had met up the night before Briggs left for a celebratory dinner, vowing to meet up for a brew in Italy after their arrivals. Unfortunately, it was a vow that would soon be broken. About a month into the journey, on December 4th, 1872, Captain Morehouse of the De Gratia discovered a vessel heading unsteadily towards his ship at a distance of only 6 miles. The ship's erratic movements caused him to suspect something was wrong, and as the vessel got closer, his suspicions grew stronger. Morehouse sent out several signals, but no one replied. As the ship got closer, he could see that no one was on deck. At this point, Morehouse decided to have 2 of his crew members, First Mate Oliver DeVoe and Second Mate John Wright, board the ship to investigate, and what they found left chills down their spines. The 2 mates boarded the ship quietly and carefully and went for a walk to check things out. Moments later, they returned with devastating news. The name on the ship's stern read Mary Celeste, and it was obvious that it was in serious distress. Not only was this his friend's ship, but it was in bad shape. The sails were partly set and in a poor condition, some missing altogether, and much of the rigging was damaged, with ropes hanging loosely over the sides. The main hatch cover was secure, but the fore and lazarette hatches were open, their covers beside them on the deck. The ship's compass had shifted from its place, and its glass cover was broken. That's not even the worst of it though. While the ship had been badly broken, the worst part was that it had also been deserted. None of the ship's crew were found, including Captain Briggs and his young family, and the lifeboat was missing. The ship may have been battered and abandoned, but it wasn't sinking. There had only been about 3.5 feet of water in the hold, which is a lot, but not an alarming amount for a ship of this size. A makeshift sounding rod, which is a device for measuring the amount of water in the hold, was found abandoned on the deck. So what happened to this ship, and where did everyone go? Morehouse took a closer look at some things in hopes of finding some answers to what had happened. He found the ship's daily log, with the final entry being dated at 8 a.m. on November 25th, 9 days earlier. The last recorded location was nearly 400 nautical miles or 740 kilometers from the point where De Gradia found her abandoned. He also found something more intriguing. While there was some personal belongings left, most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments. Aside from weather damage, there was no evidence of a struggle. Gallery equipment was neatly stowed away, and there was no sign that food had been left unprepared. There was also no indication of fire or violence. Basically, everything had been in order when the crew seemingly took the lifeboat and left. So what caused their departure? Captain Morehouse decided to bring the wreckage into Gibraltar, 600 nautical miles or 1,100 kilometers away. It was no easy task, as he had to split his crew among both ships, which slowed things down significantly. But not only did Morehouse have a personal tie to the Mary Celeste, there was also something else motivating him to salvage the wreckage. Under maritime law, anyone who rescues a wrecked vessel from sea could expect a substantial share of what the vessel and its cargo are worth. The exact amount depends on how dangerous it was to salvage the vessel. Morehouse knew he was in for a payoff. The Mary Celeste was subjected to extensive examinations, both for court purposes so Morehouse could get the cash he was after, and also to help piece together what happened to the 11 people on board the ship. 2 professionals were called upon, and after an extensive look, they found some disturbing evidence. While it was first assumed that Mary Celeste had been hit by unexpected weather, causing the wreck, there was new evidence to indicate that weather may have actually had very little to do with it. Something much darker was at play. John Austin, a well-respected surveyor of shipping, noted cuts on each side of the bow that were likely and deliberately caused by a sharp instrument. Not only that, the captain's sword was found under the bed, and it had traces of blood on it. Not long after, a professional diver chimed in with his opinion as well, only adding to the dark suspicions. A professional diver took a closer look at the structure and determined that the ship had not been involved in a collision or run aground. At this point, a group of Royal Naval captains were called in for further inspection, and the investigation only took them deeper down the rabbit hole. The Royal Naval captains confirmed that the cuts to the bow were done intentionally. They also discovered stains on one of the ship's rails that might have been blood, together with a deep mark possibly caused by an axe. Evidence was now pointing to human wrongdoing as opposed to natural disaster. But what exactly did that mean? Now, a month later, Winchester, the big player in Mary Celeste ownership history and a close relation to some of the crew members aboard the ship at the time of its disappearance, started asking when the ship would be released to finally deliver her cargo. He was apparently concerned with the payment schedule, but authorities felt something fishy was going on. Authorities believed that Winchester may have had something to do with the disappearance of Mary Celeste's crew. Actually, they went as far as believing that he may have even had Briggs and his crew killed as part of some kind of conspiracy. But it doesn't end there. Winchester adamantly claimed he was not responsible. He even spoke highly of Briggs's character, stating that Briggs would never have abandoned the ship without good reason. And after various reports indicating that foul play was most likely, authorities were suddenly given new information that completely threw them for a loop, and everything changed. All of a sudden, scientific analysis surfaced claiming that the stains found on the sword and elsewhere on the ship were not actually blood after all. On top of that, a report stated that the marks on the bow were not man-made, but came from the natural actions of the sea. Authorities were back to square one and had no choice but to surrender the wreckage to the greedy captains waiting for their payouts. A couple months later, the courts made their decision about the salvage payment, and it was much less than most were expecting. The award totaled £1,700, which was about 1/5 of the total value of the ship and cargo. The reason for the stingy payout, though, was equally as unexpected. The court wasn't impressed by Captain Morehouse's decision to still deliver Mary Celeste's cargo of petroleum during the time of the court hearings. Finding this behavior questionable, the court gave Morehouse a harsh warning. The court implied that what Morehouse did was not only wrong, but also connected to a suspicious and unsettling motive. The judge ensured that Morehouse and his crew, quote, would be under suspicion in the court of public opinion forever, quote, and while evidence failed to support theories of foul play, the suspicion lingered. It didn't take long for newspapers and locals to start talking. It's not often that a shipwreck occurs with a vanishing crew. The next theory that surfaced was also financially motivated. The idea of insurance fraud was the next played out scenario. Apparently, Winchester had the Mary Celeste heavily overinsured at the time of the wreckage. Was it possible that he planned this mysterious loss with Briggs? Or was Briggs an unsuspecting player? Winchester was able to somehow talk himself out of these allegations, and the insurance companies didn't seem too interested in looking into it any further. Even still, the truth was out there, and someone was going to figure it out eventually. In 1931, nearly 6 decades later, an article in the Quarterly Review suggested that Captain Morehouse could have set it all up, waiting for Briggs in the lonely dark waters, luring him and his crew aboard De Gradia, and then ending their lives there. However, this theory had some holes too. This theory was challenged by the fact that De Gradia was the slower ship of the two. She left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste, so it was unlikely she would have caught up with her before reaching Gibraltar. Instead, most people started to focus on relationships between the people involved, uncovering even more unexpected truths. While there was no evidence of a long-standing friendship between Briggs and Morehouse, one possibility that played in people's minds was that the entire event was planned between the two captains as partners in a conspiracy to share the salvage proceeds. And while this remained a likely theory, one dark detail could not be ignored. Before Briggs left New York on Mary Celeste, he chose to bring his wife and daughter with him, but left his son behind in the care of a relative. If he were using this incident as a way to disappear, why would he abandon his son? Not only that, some people questioned why Morehouse would create such a public mystery out of a scam. Believe it or not, theories did not stop there, but they were getting closer. Back in the 1870s, pirates were active off the coast of Morocco, so the possibility of a pirate attack was not far-fetched. However, if this were the case, the pirates would not have left high-value items behind. They would have looted everything. Theories continued to circulate about Briggs ending the lives of everyone on board, and then himself. Some now believed it was for religious reasons, but family members of those on board started to become very bothered by these accusations. Instead, the family started doing some digging of their own. Captain Briggs's cousin, Oliver Cobb, spent years putting pieces together. He believed that the transfer of the occupants to the lifeboat may have been intended as a precaution. He noted that reports from the wreckage had claimed that the lifeboat had originally been tied to the ship, possibly as a refuge from some sort of danger, and with the intention of returning to the ship when safe to do so. However, others said that Mary Celeste would have sailed away empty if the line had broken, leaving the lifeboat behind with all of its occupants. It was argued that this would have been illogical and Briggs would not have made this decision. Another person involved in the investigation, MacDonald Hastings, argued that Briggs was an experienced captain and would not have led a panicked abandonment. He wrote, quote, "If the Mary Celeste had blown her timbers, she still would have been a better bet for survival than the ship's boat." Quote, Arthur N. Putman, a New York insurance appraiser, was a leading investigator in sea mysteries in the early 20th century and wrote a similar lifeboat theory, stressing that only a single lifeboat was missing from the vessel. He had discovered that the lifeboat's rope was cut, not untied, indicating a quick departure. Arthur also discovered that the ship's log contained several mentions of ominous rumbling and small explosions from the hold, which isn't exactly uncommon for cargoes of alcohol since they naturally emit explosive gas. Instead, a more intense explosion likely took place. Arthur theorized that an explosion may have occurred below, and a crew member had ventured down to investigate, possibly with an open flame or a lit cigar, causing a larger explosion that was violent enough to dislodge the top of the hatch. In a panic, Briggs loaded everyone into the lifeboat, cut the rope, and abandoned Mary Celeste. While the explosion seems very likely, proving it was challenging. In the meantime, people started to come up with other theories, now putting the focus on nature. It was widely agreed that some extraordinary and alarming circumstance must have arisen to cause the entire crew to abandon a sound and seaworthy ship. In the earliest report of the wreckage, it was suggested that Briggs abandoned the ship after a false sounding because of a malfunction, possibly of pumps, that created a false impression that the ship was rapidly accumulating water. A severe waterspout strike before the abandonment could explain the amount of water in the ship and the ragged state of her rigging and sails. The crew may have believed Mary Celeste was in danger of sinking. Another theory included the appearance of a displaced iceberg, but hydrographical evidence suggests that an iceberg drifting so far south was improbable, and other ships would have seen it. Another possibility is that an earthquake on the seabed could have caused turbulence on the surface that damaged parts of Mary Celeste's cargo, thus releasing noxious fumes. In fear of an imminent explosion, Briggs abandoned the ship. The displaced hatches suggest that an inspection or an attempted airing had taken place, so this theory could be closer. Now, years have passed with no definitive answer to what happened to the Mary Celeste or her occupants. Over the years, there have been many retellings of the mysterious event, but many of them were completely fabricated, used incorrect names, terms, and even dates and ages. Some stories were so ridiculous they included the crew being picked off one by a giant octopus, or the entire crew going for a swim at the same time and then being eaten by sharks. Imaginations went wild, emotions ran high, and the truth was impossible to find. While we may never actually know what happened on Mary Celeste's fateful voyage when Captain Benjamin Briggs, his family, and his crew vanished without a trace, the most common theory continues to be that Mary Celeste's fate was in the hands of the paranormal. Now, if you enjoyed this video, do hit the like button, and if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos.